If people like you, there's a chance they don't even know the real you. And that should bother you, because the more you chase approval, the more you start editing yourself, your words, your reactions, even your silence. You laugh when it doesn't feel natural. You agree when something inside you resists. You hold back, not because you're calm, but because you're afraid of losing acceptance. At first, it feels harmless, just small adjustments to fit in. But those small adjustments become a pattern, and that pattern becomes a habit. Until one day, you're no longer choosing who you are. You're reacting to who others expect you to be. And slowly, you disappear, and most people don't even realize it's happening. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The more people approve of you, the more you should question what you're giving up in return. Stoicism isn't about controlling the world. It's about refusing to lose yourself in it. If this feels familiar, stay with me and share this with someone who's been losing themselves just to be accepted. Someone who needs to remember who they really are. 1. You adjust yourself to fit everyone. There's a moment most people don't notice, and it's the moment you start losing yourself. It doesn't look dramatic. No one calls it out. Nothing breaks on the surface. You're in a room. Maybe at work. Maybe with friends. Someone says something you don't fully agree with. You feel it instantly. That quiet resistance. You could say what you actually think, or you could just nod, smile, keep things smooth. So you adjust. Once, then again, and again. At first, it feels smart. Social awareness. Emotional control. You tell yourself you're just reading the room. But what you're really doing is rewriting yourself in real time. Different room, different people, different version of you. With one group, you're bold. With another, you're careful. With someone else, you laugh a little louder than you mean to. And eventually, you stop noticing. It becomes automatic. There's a man who built his entire identity around being easy to be around. Everyone liked him. At work, he agreed with his boss. With friends, he matched their energy. In relationships, he avoided anything that might create tension. He was never the problem, never difficult, never controversial. The kind of person people describe as solid. Until one day, during a casual conversation, someone asked him, "So what do you actually believe in?" And he paused. Not for a second. For too long. Because the answer wasn't clear anymore. Not because he didn't have thoughts, but because he had adjusted them so many times. He lost track of which ones were his. That's the part no one warns you about. You don't lose yourself all at once. You lose yourself in small, socially acceptable edits. And here's the twist most people never see. You think you're connecting with people, but you're not. You're becoming a reflection of whoever you're around, a version that feels familiar to them, comfortable, predictable, easy, and people respond well to that. They like you, but they don't anchor to you, because there's nothing consistent to hold on to. And over time, something shifts. People may still smile at you, still include you, but they stop taking you seriously. Because respect doesn't come from flexibility alone. It comes from knowing where you stand and standing there. The Stoics understood this clearly. Your character isn't something you perform depending on the room. It's something you carry into every room. That doesn't mean being loud. It doesn't mean arguing every point. It means this. When you speak, it's actually you speaking. When you agree, it's real agreement. When you stay silent, it's a choice, not fear. That kind of consistency is rare. And because it's rare, it has weight. So the next time you feel that moment, that pause before you adjust, don't rush past it. Slow it down. Notice it. Because that's the exact point where most people disappear without realizing it. Ask yourself, am I about to connect or erase myself? Because if you keep choosing to erase yourself, the next sign becomes inevitable. 2. You prioritize comfort over truth. It doesn't start with a lie. It starts with a pause. That split second where you know what's true for you, but you also know saying it might make things uncomfortable. So you soften it, you filter it, or you don't say it at all. Not because you're dishonest, but because you want to keep things easy. No tension, no friction, no risk, and for a while, it works. People stay relaxed around you. Conversations stay smooth. Nothing gets complicated. But here's what most people don't realize. Every time you choose comfort over truth, you train yourself to stay silent when it matters. Once, twice, then it becomes your default. There's a difference between being calm and being quiet out of fear. Most people confuse the two. They call it maturity. They call it emotional intelligence. But often, it's just avoidance in a better outfit. Think about how this shows up in real life. A coworker crosses a line, but you let it slide. A friend says something that doesn't sit right, but you laugh it off. Someone disrespects your time, your boundaries, and you tell yourself it's not worth the trouble. So you keep things peaceful on the surface. But underneath, something starts to build. Not anger, not even frustration. Something quieter. Resentment. Because a part of you knows you should have said something. And here's the twist most people don't expect. Avoiding discomfort doesn't eliminate tension, it relocates it from the room into you. Now, instead of a brief, honest moment of friction with someone else, you carry a long, silent tension within yourself, and that tension changes how you show up. You become more careful, more calculated, more distant. Not because you want to, but because you're constantly managing what you didn't say. Over time, this does something even more dangerous. You stop trusting your own voice because you've ignored it too many times. At first, it's just hesitation. Then it becomes doubt. Maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I should just let it go. And slowly, your internal clarity starts to fade. Not because you lost it, but because you stopped listening. The Stoics had a very different relationship with discomfort. They didn't chase it, but they didn't run from it either. They understood something most people avoid. Discomfort is often the price of honesty, and honesty, real honesty, isn't loud. It doesn't need to be aggressive. It doesn't need to create drama. It just needs to be real. Clear, direct, grounded. The kind of truth that doesn't attack, but also doesn't bend. Because when you consistently choose comfort over truth, you don't become more peaceful. You become more divided. One part of you speaks, the other stays silent. And that split only grows wider with time, until eventually, you don't feel like one person anymore. You feel like a performance, and people can sense that. They may not call it out, but they feel the hesitation, the holding back. Because authenticity has a weight to it, and when it's missing, something always feels off. So the next time you feel that moment, when truth rises up but discomfort follows, don't rush to smooth it over. Stay there for a second longer. Because that discomfort, it's not something to avoid. It's a signal that you're standing at the edge of being real. And if you keep stepping away from that edge, you don't just lose your voice, you lose the part of you that knows when to use it. And once that starts to fade, the next sign doesn't just appear, it takes over. 3. You need approval before you act. It doesn't look like dependence. It looks like being careful. You have an idea, a decision to make, something you want to say, do, or pursue. But before you move, you check. You ask someone what they think. You replay the situation in your head. You imagine how it will be received. And then you wait, not for clarity, for approval. At first, it feels responsible. You tell yourself you're just gathering input, being thoughtful, strategic. But there's a subtle shift most people miss. You're not looking for perspective. You're looking for permission. And once that becomes your pattern, something changes. You stop trusting your first instinct, that initial voice. The one that knows what feels right gets quieter. Not because it's wrong, but because it's been overruled too many times. So now, every decision becomes slower, heavier. You hesitate longer than you should. You second-guess things that used to be simple. And eventually, you don't move at all until someone else confirms it's okay. There's a story about a man who couldn't make even small decisions on his own. What to wear, what to say in meetings, whether to take an opportunity. Not because he lacked intelligence, but because somewhere along the way, he learned that his judgment alone wasn't enough. So he built a habit. Run it by someone first, every time. At work, he'd ask for opinions before sharing his own. In conversations, he'd adjust based on reactions in real time. Online, he'd check responses before deciding what to post next. And people saw him as thoughtful, considerate. But over time, something shifted. They stopped seeing him as decisive, stopped seeing him as someone who leads. Because when you constantly wait for validation, you signal something without saying it. I don't trust myself. And people respond to that. They may still support you, still give input, but they don't follow you. Because leadership, even in small moments, comes from conviction, not consensus. Here's the twist most people don't expect. The more approval you seek, the less of it you actually earn. Because approval, real approval, is drawn to people who don't need it to act. People who decide, who move, who take responsibility for the outcome. Not perfectly, but independently. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed that your mind is your only true domain, not other people's opinions, not their reactions, not their agreement, just your judgment and what you choose to do with it. That doesn't mean ignoring others. It means this: you listen, but you don't depend. You consider, but you don't wait. You act, even if no one confirms you should. Because the moment you require approval to move, you hand over control of your life. And once that happens, your direction becomes unstable. It shifts based on who you're around, what they think, how they react. You're no longer steering, you're adjusting to feedback in real time, and that creates a dangerous loop. You act arrow, you look for validation, arrow, you adjust arrow, you act again, but not fully. And with each cycle, your confidence weakens. Not because you failed, but because you never fully owned your decisions. So even when things go right, it doesn't feel like your win. And when things go wrong, it confirms your doubt. That's how dependency forms. Quietly, gradually. Until one day, you don't ask, "What do I want to do?" You ask, "What will they approve of?" And in that moment, your identity is no longer internal. It's external, shaped, filtered, controlled. So the next time you feel the urge to check, to ask, to wait, pause. Not to seek more input, but to listen to what's already there. Because clarity isn't something others give you. It's something you recognize when you stop overriding it. And if you keep ignoring that voice, you won't just hesitate. You'll lose the ability to decide who you are without someone else telling you first. And once that happens, you don't just follow opinions. You become dependent on them. 4. You explain yourself to be accepted. It doesn't feel like insecurity. It feels like being understood. You make a decision. You choose something for yourself. And almost immediately, you feel the need to explain it. Not just briefly, but thoroughly. Why you did it, what led to it, what you meant, what you didn't mean. You fill in every possible gap, so no one misunderstands you. Because being misunderstood feels uncomfortable, so you try to remove that discomfort completely. But here's the shift most people never notice. You're not explaining to communicate. You're explaining to be accepted. And there's a difference. Real communication is simple. It's clear. It stands on its own. But when you're chasing acceptance, your words start to stretch. You add more context, more justification, more reassurance. Not because the message needs it, but because you're trying to control how people receive it. There's a story about a man who could never give a straight answer. Ask him a simple question and you'd get a long explanation, not because he didn't know what he thought, but because he needed you to agree with it. So before you could disagree, he tried to close every door, anticipate every objection, soften every edge. And for a while, people listened. But over time, something changed. They stopped engaging, because when someone over-explains, it doesn't feel like clarity. It feels like pressure. And pressure does something subtle. It creates distance. Because instead of hearing your decision, people feel like they're being managed, guided toward approval, and that shifts the dynamic completely. Here's the twist most people miss. The more you try to control how people see you, the less control you actually have. Because now your peace depends on their agreement. If they understand you, you're fine. If they don't, you feel unsettled. So you explain more, and more, and more, until your words lose weight. Because when everything is explained, nothing feels grounded. Strong decisions don't need layers. They don't need protection. They carry their own weight. The Stoics understood this in a very quiet way. They didn't try to manage perception. They focused on alignment. If their actions matched their values, that was enough. Not everyone would agree. Not everyone would understand. And that was fine. Because approval was never the goal. Integrity was. And integrity doesn't argue for itself. It shows up, consistently, without needing to be defended every time. When you over-explain, you send a signal without realizing it. My decision isn't enough on its own. And people feel that. They may not call it out, but they start questioning it too. Because confidence doesn't come from how much you say. It comes from how little you need to justify. There's a kind of quiet strength in being misunderstood and not rushing to fix it. Not because you don't care, but because you're grounded enough to let your actions speak over time. That's something most people struggle with, because we're taught to clarify everything, resolve everything, make sure everyone is on the same page. But life doesn't work that way. Some people will misunderstand you. Some people won't agree. And if your stability depends on fixing that every time, you'll never feel settled. So the next time you feel the urge to explain more than necessary, pause. Say what needs to be said, and stop there. Let the silence do its work. Let people interpret, because your job is not to control every perception. Your job is to stay aligned with what you chose, and if you can do that consistently, your presence starts to carry something words never could. Weight, clarity, respect, because when you no longer need everyone to understand you, you stop negotiating your place in the room. You simply take it, and once that shift happens, the next line people cross becomes very clear, and so does how you respond to it. 5. You tolerate disrespect to be liked. It doesn't always look like disrespect. That's why it's dangerous. Sometimes it sounds like a joke, a comment that lands a little off, a tone that feels slightly dismissive. You notice it, but you don't react. You tell yourself it's not a big deal. You laugh it off. You move on. Because calling it out would create tension, and tension risks losing approval. So you let it pass. Once, then again, and again. At first, it feels like emotional control. You're being calm, mature, unbothered. But here's the part most people miss. There's a difference between choosing peace and accepting disrespect. One is strength, the other is permission. Because every time you ignore a crossed line, you teach people something about you. Not with words, with silence. You teach them what you tolerate, what you won't push back on, where your limits actually are. And people learn fast. There's a guy who was known for being easygoing. Nothing bothered him. Friends teased him, sometimes a little too far. Co-workers interrupted him, talked over him in meetings. Even people close to him would cancel plans last minute without much explanation. And he'd always respond the same way. It's fine. No worries. Don't stress it. He thought he was keeping the peace. But over time, something shifted. The jokes got sharper, the interruptions more frequent, the disregard more obvious. Until one day, someone cut him off mid-sentence. Not once, but twice, in front of the whole team, and no one reacted. Because to them, this was normal. That's the cost. Not immediate conflict, gradual erosion. Here's the twist most people don't expect. Disrespect rarely starts as intention. It starts as testing, small moments, subtle pushes, and when there's no resistance, it becomes a pattern. Not because people are evil, but because boundaries that aren't enforced don't exist. And the more you tolerate, the more you signal, this is acceptable. So people repeat it. They don't think, I'll disrespect him. They think, this is how we interact. And once that dynamic is set, it's hard to reverse. Because now, if you suddenly push back, it feels like a change in character, not a correction. And people resist that. They question it. Why are you being so sensitive? You never had a problem before. But the truth is, you did. You just didn't act on it. The Stoics approached this differently. They didn't seek conflict, but they also didn't avoid clarity. They understood that self-respect isn't something you feel. It's something you demonstrate. Through action, through consistency, through what you allow and what you don't. Not aggressively, but firmly. Because when you respect yourself, you don't need to overreact. You don't need to argue. You simply don't accept what crosses your line. And that changes everything. The energy shifts, the dynamic resets. People begin to adjust. Not because you demanded it, but because your behavior made it clear. Here's something most people don't realize. People don't treat you based on what you say you deserve. They treat you based on what you consistently accept. That's the real standard. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. So the next time something feels off, even slightly, don't rush to smooth it over. Don't immediately minimize it. Pause. Pay attention to that instinct, because that's your internal boundary speaking. And if you keep ignoring it, you don't just lose respect from others. You lose it from yourself. And once that happens, you stop expecting better. You stop asking for more. You settle quietly until the line between who you are and how you're treated disappears. But the moment you decide, even once, that something is not acceptable and you act on it calmly, clearly, everything begins to change. Because now you're no longer hoping to be respected. You're operating from it. And when that shift happens, what used to feel normal becomes impossible to tolerate. And that's where the final sign reveals itself. Not outside, but inside. 6. You feel empty. Even when accepted. This is the part no one talks about. Because on the surface, everything looks fine. People like you, you're included, you're respected. At least it seems that way. You're not alone, you're not rejected. So by all external measures, you're doing well. And yet, something feels off. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a quiet sense that something isn't landing. You leave conversations feeling drained instead of fulfilled. You get approval, but it doesn't stay. You achieve the reaction you wanted and still feel nothing. So you try again. Adjust a little more. Say things a little better. Be just a bit more likable. Maybe then it will feel real, but it doesn't. And that's when the confusion sets in. Because you did everything right, you avoided conflict, you kept the peace, you were agreeable, adaptable, easy to be around. You played the role perfectly. So why does it feel empty? Here's the truth. Most people never say out loud because they didn't accept you. They accepted the version of you that you created for them. And deep down, you know that. That's why it doesn't land. That's why it doesn't stick. Because approval only satisfies when it's directed at something real. And when you've been adjusting yourself for so long, you're not even sure what real is anymore. So even when people validate you, a part of you disconnects. Because it knows, this isn't fully me. And that creates a strange kind of loneliness. Not the kind where no one is around. The kind where people are around. But no one is actually seeing you. There's a difference, and it's heavy. There was someone who built an entire life around being accepted. He was liked in every room, adaptable, polite, easygoing. He knew how to read people, how to adjust just enough to fit in anywhere. And it worked. Doors opened. Opportunities came. People enjoyed being around him. But one night after a long day of social interactions, he sat alone in his apartment and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no sense of connection, just a quiet emptiness. And for the first time, he asked himself, if I stopped trying to be who they like, would they still like me? And the answer scared him, not because it was no, but because he didn't know. That's the cost, not rejection, uncertainty about your own identity. Because when you build your life around being accepted, you slowly disconnect from the part of you that decides who you are. The Stoics understood something that cuts through all of this. External validation is unstable. It changes. It shifts. It disappears. And if your sense of self depends on it, you will always feel unsettled, no matter how much you receive, because it's not designed to anchor you. Only you can do that, and that doesn't come from isolating yourself. It doesn't come from rejecting people. It comes from this: being the same person, regardless of who you're around. Not rigid, not closed off, but grounded. So when people respond to you, they're responding to something consistent, something real, and when that happens, something shifts internally. You don't chase the reaction, you don't analyze it, you receive it, or you don't. And it doesn't define you either way, because now your sense of self isn't built on their approval. It's built on your alignment. And that alignment feels different. It's quieter, but it's solid. It doesn't spike and then disappear. It stays. So the next time you feel that emptiness, even in the middle of acceptance, don't ignore it. Don't try to fill it with more approval. Listen to it. Because it's not a lack of attention. It's a signal that something essential has been replaced. And if you follow that signal honestly, you'll start to see exactly where it happened. Not in one big moment, but in all the small ones where you chose approval over yourself. And once you see that clearly, you can begin to reverse it. Not by becoming someone new, but by finally returning to who you were before you started adjusting. Because real fulfillment doesn't come from being accepted by everyone. It comes from no longer needing to be. And when you reach that point, you don't just feel better, you feel whole. You've just seen how it happens. Not all at once, but in small, almost invisible ways. Adjusting yourself to fit in, choosing comfort over truth, waiting for approval before you act, explaining yourself just to be accepted, tolerating what you shouldn't, and eventually feeling empty, even when everything looks right on the outside. This isn't about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming aligned, because the moment you stop betraying yourself, everything changes. Not overnight, but in the way you speak, the way you decide, the way you show up. So start small. Notice the next time you're about to adjust, the next time you stay silent, the next time you look for approval before you move. Pause and choose differently. That's where it begins. If this video resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Someone who's been losing themselves just to be accepted. Thank you for being here, for taking the time to reflect, and for choosing growth over comfort. I'll see you in the next video.